Order, order. Hello and welcome to Reporters Without Orders, a podcast where we talk about what made news, what didn't, and some things that absolutely shouldn't have. I'm your host, Tanishka Sodhi, and I'm joined by two journalists who have had some fantastic stories this month. We're joined by Akanksha Kumar, independent journalist who you may recognize as a former News Laundry reporter. I remember my first RWO podcast was also hosted by Akanksha. It's very good to have you back.
I do that hand holding for a lot of young reporters
Yes.
at News Laundry.
How does it feel to be back?
Nice, I think. And it's good to be back at RWO for sure.
Akanksha's story, which was published on News Laundry, is titled Inside UP Clean Sheet to STF Encounter Death Number 25, an autopsy cover-up, other loopholes. We're also joined by Amrita Singh, a reporting fellow at The Caravan, who's done a beautiful deep dive that you've probably already come across. It's on Neeta Ambani's campaign to conquer the public eye. Hi, Amrita. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've done a story that I think has been on the minds of a lot of fellow journalists and also readers who've been wanting to know more about this campaign of Neeta Ambani. So, yeah, great job.
I hope they got something out of it.
So before we start, I mean, you both have done stories that have taken a significant amount of time and, you've spoken to a lot of people, gone through a lot of documents. I'd just like to understand how long it took you guys, how many people you spoke to, and how does it feel to finally have it out there? Amrita?
I worked on this story for 9 months.
Wow.
And I spoke to almost 70 people. And that was in itself quite a challenge because people are very, very scared of speaking about the Ambanis. So even people who would be like off record or speak anonymously, you ask them a pointed question about the family, they'll go pale. So I think that was quite a big challenge, but also gave me more time to sort of like sit with the material and see what is out there. So that was fun.
And how does it feel to finally have it out there? It's like, it's literally your baby you spent 9 months working on.
Wow, yeah. I didn't see it like that, but I'm happy that it's out there.
Yeah.
I do not have to nurture it inside me anymore.
Yeah, and it's again independent organizations
Yes.
like Caravan that are
Yes.
able to give you 9 months to work on a story like this.
Absolutely. It's
So-
the editors are actually like really, really supportive.
Yeah.
And the labor that I have put in the piece, the editors have put in just as much. So I'm quite grateful for that.
Wow. I still have a few pages left because Caravan does have extremely long stories, but
yes.
I'll be done with
We
it by today.
apologize.
No. We love it. Akanksha, you too you've always been our charge sheet reporter. And this time you've gone even beyond that. There have been a lot of documents. You've even spoken to eyewitnesses. And do tell us what the process was like for you and how it feels to have it published now.
So I think Encounter was a big story from UP in the month of September after the encounter of Mangesh Yadav was reported from Sultanpur. And I think Encounter has been normalized to a large extent in the state of UP. It is projected as this plank of law and order, which is justified day in and day out by the chief minister as well as other BJP leaders from UP. And I think the sheer political noise and cacophony around Mangesh Yadav's encounter kind of just got me thinking into like what is going on. Like it was a robbery and the guy, they could have shot him in the leg, but he was killed. And there were a lot of, ifs and buts even in that particular encounter. When I started doing my research, I also just sensed that there was this, gap in terms of reportage on encounters.
Okay.
Like I said that, it has been normalized and internalized as a part of the state policy to such an extent that we are no longer documenting each and every encounter in a very proper manner. It's there in the headlines and then it just fizzles out from our collective memories.
Yeah.
And that is when I came across this case of Bhalchand Yadav in Chitrakoot. The encounter had taken place in March 2021. The same investigation agency was involved, which is the UPSTF, that was involved in Mangesh Yadav's encounter as well. And this seemed to be the only case where the family had approached the court asking, for justice and they maintained till date that it was a fake encounter. So, of course, we'll talk about the case in detail, but I think the sheer fact, the audacity which this family kind of seemed to reflect in terms of approaching the courts and asking the court that an FIR be filed against
Yeah.
14 policemen who were a part of that encounter squad, kind of drew me to this story. And after just a couple of headlines in 2021 that, okay, there is an encounter in Chitrakoot and the family has approached court, the district court in Chitrakoot had ordered that an FIR be filed against these 14 cops. There was no reportage, there was no follow up. Whether an FIR was filed, what really happened to the case, we just didn't know. So between October and November, I went to Chitrakoot twice. I met the family members and I tried to meet as many people, who seemed to be important to the case. And then I tried to zoom out and, I reached out to officials, police, personnel who were a part of the case, but retired police officials as well, legal experts and lawyers who have been conducting fact-finding, fact-finding on the ground
Yeah.
since 2017. And that's, I think that, so that was the process. And now the story is, of course, out. It took me 2 months to kind of wrap my head around it.
So, your story, Akanksha, also speaks about how in May this year, I think 3 years after the encounter happened, UP Police has filed a final report indicating insufficient evidence to back the fake encounter allegations. And while the district court is yet to take cognizance of the FIR, the widow has filed a petition challenging it on October 10th. And the next hearing, I believe, was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, December 10th. So, while we'll go more into that, Akanksha's story focuses on the 1,400-page final report, documents submitted to the police, statements of eyewitnesses, and she found several major loopholes that raise concerns about the police investigating their own encounter-related cases. Akanksha, can you take us through the major loopholes that you have found?
Yeah, so I think this final report was a sort of closure report filed by the UP police, giving a clean chit to UP STF. And at the end of 3 years, they kind of came to the conclusion, and the concluding remarks of the IO in this case was that the man who was killed in an encounter, his widow, her name is Nathunya Devi, who is the protagonist of the story. She has filed this complaint because, as an afterthought, and it is quote unquote natural, not unnatural, for her to harbor ill intentions for the police because her husband was killed in an encounter, and her brother-in-law, who is Bhalchand's younger brother, who had gone on the day of the encounter to drop him for a hearing at Satna District Court, he too was named in an FIR filed a day later after the encounter. And therefore, the police put the entire onus of filing just an FIR or the complaint on the family, that, they harbor some ill intentions.
Okay.
And that is why they are trying to unnecessarily build a case against the STF team. In this story, we have examined at least 4 set of documents which are used to document any unnatural death or death under suspicious circumstances. So there is an inquest report which is filed as soon as the dead body reaches a mortuary and family members are called upon to identify the deceased. The second document that we have referred to as a post-mortem report. Then there is an FSL report. And the fourth document is a second opinion by a different department, which is referred to as the State Medico-Legal Cell in Lucknow. And all these are, so to say, Tanishka, they are scientific documents.
Yeah.
And everything that these documents are saying should converge to one logical conclusion, establishing that it was a genuine encounter. But when we have gone through all the 1400 pages of FR, including these documents, which are part of the annexures of the FR. We find that all these documents, the experts, be it the autopsy surgeons who performed the post-mortem, or be it the Naib Tehsildar who helped in identifying the body and has mentioned his remarks, we come across his remarks in the Panchayat Nama or inquest report, they actually start contradicting each other. There seems to be a concerted effort in shielding the policemen. And one of the major loopholes which the story has highlighted is the fact that the post-mortem report mentioned a total of 15 injuries, out of which there were at least 13 firearm injuries or gunshot wounds. And for those who are not aware of so many technical jargons, the gunshot wounds are usually classified as wounds of entry and wounds of exit, depending on the projectile of the bullet. There were seven wounds of exit and seven wounds of entry and six wounds of exit in Bhalchand Yadav's post-mortem report. And the autopsy surgeon mentions blackening around 3 wounds of entry. This is very significant because blackening around any wound of entry in case of a firearm injury suggests it was a close-range shot.
Okay.
There is one wound of exit, which the dimension of which is 10 cm by 5 cm, which actually suggests that it was a point blank range shot. Now, when you look at the statements given by the police men who were involved in the encounter, there were 5 members from the STF team, STF Lucknow. There are 5 from the local Chitrakoot SWAT team, and remaining 5 from the nearest police station in Chitrakoot. They all say, and this is the common template in all encounters, that we received information from a mukhbir or an informant. We went to the spot. We first alerted them and asked them to surrender, but they were the ones who fired at us first, and in our self-defense we fired back. That is what led to the death of Bhalchand Yadav. We took him to the hospital where the doctor declared him dead. Now, ideally, if we were to believe the theory that police is trying to prove in this particular case, one would assume that there should be a considerable distance between the police party and the deceased. But blackening of wound actually suggests that the police, there was not much distance between the police and the person who died, which actually raises questions about the genuinity of this entire encounter and whether they could have caught him alive. And they contradict themselves in report after report and document after document, because in the FSL report, which was submitted after the postmortem report, it's a report by the Jhansi FSL laboratory. And the concerned person, he says that, I think the estimated distance, I've gone to the spot of the encounter, which was Maro Bandha Jungle in Chitrakoot, and I think the distance should be 50 to 60 meters. I ran this quote through multiple legal experts and people who have been fighting encounter-related cases in courts, and they say it's impossible to have, to shoot at someone from 50, 60 meters and then say that you have blackening, which it's unlikely.
Doesn't add up.
Yeah. So that is what kind of is a major loophole in the police theory here, as far as the encounter is concerned.
Yeah.
Then, another second major flaw in the FSL report is that they say that we took swabs from both the hands. They had shown a rifle, a .315 bore rifle next to Bhalchand. But the FSL report showed that there were no traces of nitrite or any such element that could establish presence of gunpowder in the hands of Bhalchand. I mean, again, this shows that maybe he had a gun, he didn't have a gun. But the police theory, again, doesn't add up. To cover up this particular part, they reach out to the State Medical Legal Cell, where a particular doctor by the name of Dr. Ghyasuddin Khan, he tells them that, absence of gunshot residue does not mean that he didn't really fire the gun. The firearm is self-discharge. So I think all these multiple statements and different reports, they actually land up contradicting each other. When we run past these same remarks through legal experts and people who have a fair understanding of, forensic and how it actually works on
Yeah.
the ground.
And what are the allegations by Nathunia, the widow? Do they rely on one of these reports, or is it something else?
So I think one of the major piece of evidence for the family, which they have preserved carefully for the last 3 years, is unfortunately the multiple photos of dead body of Bhalchand Yadav. And when I had also gone to visit them, they showed me those photographs in which, you can see that, his intestines were bulging out of the stomach. There was swelling in private parts. There is another photo of his hand which shows nails being pulled out. And the district court, which actually had ordered that an FIR be filed against these 14 policemen, the special judge had actually taken cognizance of these photos. And even when I was, reaching out to response from the doctors who were part of the postmortem panel, or even, other experts like Naib Tehsildar who first prepared the inquest report, they were either silent on this. One of them actually lashed out at me that, who are you to ask me these questions? Whatever we have to say, we'll tell the court. I mean, quite hilariously, what they mention in their statements before the police, which is part of the FR, is the fact that, it's quite common for someone who's been through an encounter in a jungle-like terrain to have sustained injuries like these. But what doesn't explain is how can someone have, swelling in private parts? The post-mortem report says, his heart was ruptured, liver was ruptured. When his fourth and fifth rib was fractured, there was a fracture in right elbow. And I think one of the persons whom I quote in the story is someone by the name of Akram Akhtar Chaudhry, who has done these fact findings in Western UP in 2018. And he says that, if this encounter was carried out on a plane in a place which was densely populated, I can still believe this theory that, okay, he climbed from one roof to another and he sustained this fracture or he broke his rib. But in a jungle-like terrain, where there are no firearm injuries near the heart or near the liver. They are all in the upper parts, but it's either on, a hand or it's on shoulder. So this doesn't explain. And according to advocate Chaudhry, these actually are signs of torture. This actually suggests that he was allegedly tortured before being shot dead.
And Akanksha, if you can tell me and our viewers what usually happens in cases of police investigating allegations against their own, such as this particular case, is there a different sort of process that is followed, or is this just how it is and you have to sort of accept that it is hard to accept that there will not be any sort of bias in a case like this when it is the force investigating the force? So if there is any such precedent to this, you could tell us about.
So I think when I was doing my research on this particular case, what I figured is that families who actually want some sort of closure after an encounter death, they really have to fight it hard and long enough in different courts. And the trial can extend for as many as 20 to 30 years. So that's the, usual pace of justice, unfortunately, in our country. But I think to our viewers, Tanishka, one thing which I would like to point out is the fact that, as per my understanding as a reporter, there is no grievance redressal mechanism in place for people whom the police or the state has labeled as criminal. they are named in, 2 FIRs, or they may have a co-accused like a dacoit, in one of those FIRs. Uh, the question that we really need to ask ourselves is, does that person really have to be killed like this?
Yeah.
And if the family is aggrieved and they don't really believe what the police are saying, there is no forum for them to really go and file a complaint. So be it Mangesh Yadav's family, be it Bhalchandra Yadav, the usual course available to them under law is that they have to file an application at a magistrate court under 156(3), and only when the magistrate tells the police that no, I think this doesn't look like a genuine encounter to me, when you look at the 2010 guidelines issued by NHRC or another set of guidelines issued by the Supreme Court, where it has been clearly said that there have to be reasonable grounds for you to use a force of that kind, only then FIRs are being registered. And I mean, in this particular case also, the district court judge had said that FIR be filed in October 2021. FIR was actually filed 9 months later in July 2022. So a lot of families, either because of shame or, if you look at the socioeconomic aspect of it, these men are also mostly estranged from their families, so they usually don't really raise a hue and cry or try and approach courts or any other platform for that matter. But even when they do so, like in this case, Natunya Devi first wrote multiple letters, was sent to Chief Minister, UP DGP, CJI, Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court, and she got no reply. It was only then that she wrote an application to the special judge at Chitrakoot District Court, filing an application under 156(3) of the CRPC that resulted in filing of this FIR. So there is no recourse available for common people if someone feels that this encounter is not justified.
And you met the family recently when you went to report, and it has been more than 3 years since the encounter happened. You've also mentioned how it is unusual for the family to actually file a case and to continue with it as long as they have. Can you tell us what it has been like for the family, what it was like meeting them, their current condition, and why they are continuing to fight despite odds being against them?
So I think one thing which I wanted to mention in the podcast, and I'll begin by first quoting something from the lawyer. The advocate's name in this particular case is Chitrakoot District Court lawyer Rajendra Singh Yadav. And while I was, trying to understand the details of the case during our initial conversation, he named a particular local reporter in Chitrakoot, and I also know that guy. And his, in a very angry and frustrated tone, he kept on asking me, why don't these guys report on this case? Why haven't they followed up? Why don't you ask him? And I didn't have a reply to this, angst of the lawyer, because he himself reportedly was being threatened by UPSTF men. And he even wrote a letter to the Bar Council of India that, there are men in plain clothes who often come to the district court, they surround me and they start talking about, how about if we just kill someone like that. And so it was his allegation was that I'm being intimidated only because I've decided to take on this case and I'm following it up, on a regular basis. So that was the frustration of the lawyer as far as the reportage is concerned, which I wanted to highlight and tell fellow reporters and, especially local media personnel to follow up on all these cases and not really accept the state version as the cardinal truth. And as far as the family is concerned, I think one common strand which I have noticed over the years is that when someone has gone through a trauma like this, there is really not much to say in terms of being very emotive about what they have gone through. So even if you will meet a Muslim family who has witnessed a lynching and has lost someone to lynching, after a point, they will just reiterate the same chain of events without being very emotive about it. But one thing which was very clear to me is the fact that his brother Lal Chand and father Ram Avatar, who first saw the body, they are very they vehemently they told me that we will ensure, no matter how long it takes, that justice is done in our case. And I think a sight which will stay with me as a reporter is his father Ram Avatar just folding his hands and saying that hamari guhar hai ki humko isme nyay mile. So our appeal is that justice be done in this case, because the family feels that dignity was denied even in death. An entire village has seen that his face was blackened. The body was almost disfigured beyond recognition. The cremation was done with, mouths covered with gamcha and, things like that. So they have not really got closure after performing the final rites, so to say. The final closure will come, they say. They don't even want any sort of compensation. In fact, with Akhilesh Yadav being so vocal about Mangesh Yadav's case, a persistent, request to me as a journalist was to please somehow make Akhilesh Yadav aware of this case and see if he can meet the family, so that these 14 policemen get, their due punishment. That is what at least the family wants, to be able to move on in life, because he was the sole bread earner in a family of 6, and there cannot be a replacement. Their lives have been changed forever. He was on his way to attend a hearing related to a theft case. There is an order sheet with signatures of Bhalchand Yadav. He had gone there on 31st March and he was supposed to go again on 1st April, and in between this encounter happened. So it's a tragedy which they were not really prepared for. They also maintain that unlike what the state government has been saying, that since he was co-accused with a history sheeter named dacoit Gauri Yadav in Chitrakoot, people see him as a dacoit. At least the family maintains that he was not a dacoit. Yes, he was named in 2 FIRs and we were trying to fight it out legally.
Yeah, but like you said, regardless of that being denied, dignity in death is something that will continue to haunt the family until they do get justice. And I think your report does a really good job of investigating the loopholes and the family struggles. So do read it if you haven't already. It's titled Inside UP Clean Chit to STF Encounter, Death Number 25, An Autopsy Cover-Up, Other Loopholes. It is unfortunately unusual for reporters to spend so much time just on one particular case, on one particular encounter, and report on it so thoroughly, which Akanksha has always done a really great job of doing. For young journalists like me, it's always an inspiration. And we can only do this actually with your support. We don't take any advertisements from corporations or political parties, and stories like this do require resources and time, and do continue to support us and subscribe if you haven't already. You can go to newslaundry.com/subscription and choose a plan of your choice. Amrita, your story now. I want to start by asking, it's a quite a different story from what we were discussing, but equally interesting. I want to start by asking you, did you start the story by looking at how Ambanis operate in the sports and culture field, or did you start by exploring this as a profile of Neeta Ambani? What came first?
For over a year, I've been interested in sort of covering the intersection of culture with Bollywood and politics. I'd done a long form in our last media issue also related to the art world in Delhi.
Right.
So that's just a space that I realized that, there's a lot that can be said about it. And when it comes to culture reporting in India, you have like some great journalists as well, but a majority of the reporting is like, pap videos, or, in one of the things that I've quoted for Neeta also, one of the pieces in HT said about her outfit recently that she was exuding pure babe energy. So you get these kind of things. So I wanted to look at this space in a more serious manner. And I mean, the Ambanis have sort of been everywhere. So that was something that these were things that were just coming up in a lot of conversations that I was having with several people about this. The NMACC, and even the wedding is a cultural moment, right? Like we haven't seen a movie premiere also get the kind of attention that their events have been getting. And you see this parade of Bollywood stars that's happening around them. So somehow that's how it came together. And so I started looking at basically, Reliance's inroads in these areas, because their name was coming up so much in these conversations. And all those threads sort of tied back to Neeta, because she's becoming the face of all these endeavors, like may it be sports, may it be culture, may it be luxury. And with the IOC and the NMACC. And the NMACC, I think, was a big thing because in her generation of the Ambanis, she's the only one like that, and a Reliance initiative is named after. Generally, it's Dhirubhai Ambani, or
Right.
a generic thing like Jio. So it sort of came back to her. So now I think like it's turned out to be a profile-ish thing of Neeta, and also Reliance, what they have been doing in these fields. So,
And I mean, what was the one anecdote, or what was the one piece of information or realization that really surprised you the most? Because
Right.
it is something that we've seen commentary about. We have also, there have been analysis about Neeta Ambani. I mean, even looking at it as a citizen, there are so many things that we observe. But
Yeah.
what really stood out to you that was the most surprising?
I don't know. I mean, I think I was taken by a lot of the anecdotes that I was told about the family and how they operate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the queen-like behavior that is there described in the piece was quite
Yeah.
interesting for me to hear. But also, I think what people forget is the kind of monopoly. They have monopolistic tendencies, which is something that you can see it impact sports in a big way. And you can argue, like, it's for the best, or like, not
Yeah.
for the best. And with movies also, I think a similar thing is happening right now, but it's still like in a very nascent stage, because
Yeah.
they have a streaming platform, they have a production house, and they have a lot of support from these actors and stars. So that is something that's going to happen. And also like JioStar, the merged entity between Hotstar
Yeah.
and Jio, she's going to be the chairperson of that. So I think that particular deal and her being the chairperson for me was a very important thing, because then it's just like disproportionate control in the hands of one person,
Yeah.
right? Like that is what the situation can lead to. And there have been allegations of censorship against Jio in the past also, which again don't get as much coverage in the media. So organization that faces allegations of censorship, being responsible for producing so much creative content,
Yeah.
what does that lead to? So there were concerning anecdotes, I would say.
Yeah.
And same thing with art, the space of art that they've tried to enter with the NMACC. I think what was very interesting for me over there is that the Ambanis were never considered like big patrons of art. You have a lot of corporates backing art and these kind of things, but even the gallerists I've spoken to, and Mumbai has a very tight knit sort of art scene. They're like, we didn't really spot them at any exhibition or opening, or they are not considered big collectors of
Yeah.
art. Like, Kiran Nadar is considered the biggest, but like she would be spotted at each and everything. So they just sort of like come in and they've just sort of announced themselves as these big patrons, big supporters. So to see what they were doing in that environment, and how much of it, like the employees told me that whatever they are doing is, it seems to be that we are fulfilling their whims and fancies, and they project it as like we want this to be an inclusive space where people from small towns come, and but that does not seem to be the reality of what
Yeah.
they're actually doing in these spaces. So it's a lot of self-projection in that.
An
So, yeah.
anecdote from your story that I think really captures how insignificant everyone is compared to the Ambanis, at least for them, is Prateek Kohad
Yeah.
actually busking in the
Yeah.
in NMAC.
NMACC in a corridor over
Correct.
there.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Honestly, I was just stunned when I heard of this particular anecdote, because again, Pratik Kohad is, yeah, I mean, we've been hearing his songs for a very long time. He's a very big thing. And yeah, but there's also like, I mean, there were quite a few anecdotes like that. So, for instance, like there was supposed to be some surprise party for Neeta Ambani, and Arijit Singh was apparently supposed to perform for 15 minutes. And I was told that, the Neeta's son, youngest son, kept saying, "Ek aur ho jaye Arijit," and he performed for some 2.5 hours. So that's the thing. The power that they have over artists at this point of time is too much, because again, you don't have government patronage for art, right? Or if you do, then it is like it seems to be compromised. So so people who have this kind of power over artists dictating the terms of it, I feel like that incident for me showed that, like,
Yeah.
more than anything else. Like, I'm sure, like, Pratik must be paid for it. He's not responded to my queries, but like, it's a mutual thing. So
Yeah.
in that, there's nothing wrong with it per
Yeah.
se, but it shows the kind of power that they enjoy.
Yeah.
So
And even the soft power that your story also dives deep into,
right,
just their need to, I think someone has given you a quote about how they have a need to establish themselves as the first family of
Right,
India, which
right.
was something that was very obviously significant to me as
Right.
well, was I just want to know why. I mean, for someone like the Ambanis, I mean,
Yeah.
they are as big, if not more, than
Yeah.
Gautam Adani and
Yeah.
his empire, but you don't really see that sort of push from within as you do with the Ambanis. And even
Right.
with the wedding, the sort of PR that we saw around the wedding, around the pre-wedding, that was unprecedented. And
Right.
even then there was this question, why? What do
Why?
they want out of this? I mean,
Yeah.
what have you come to a
So the
conclusion
thing is,
about?
there are 2-3 things, and again, that was also one of the main things that I was trying to understand with the piece, as to why they are doing this and why is Neeta at the helm of these things,
Yeah.
right? And I think one major thing that I sort of deduced was that, like, when the split between the Ambani brothers happened, at that time there was a lot of negative publicity about the Ambanis in the media, like about Mukesh as well, Anil, and at that point of time, I mean, I was told by someone who, like, Mukesh had engaged Neera Radia at one point of time, right? And someone basically who was associated with the PR at that point of time told me that it seems to be that they realize that, they need to be facing the consumer more. Like, in the sense, you have your petrochemicals, right? You are giants in these areas, but in a day-to-day life, like a consumer doesn't really know what Reliance is. So you want to be facing them and, project yourself in a certain way to have, like, the public on your side in some
Yeah.
senses, right? Because at that point of time, we forget, like, I mean, the acrimony was so much. Like, there were allegations of, like, the brothers spying at each other, this, that, and whatnot. So, and it took a toll on the company. The share prices did like dip.
Right.
So they realized that image management, like, that's what I gathered from my conversations, was a big part of what they had to do next, so that they have, like, a sort of like a control in, like, a sway in the public in one way or the other. So that's how they sort of like got into these areas. Like, your Reliance Retail is like a consumer facing thing, right? Like, people would be wearing clothes of, like, Reliance. Sports, they realized, and a bunch of people told me this also, like, not as a part of this analysis, but separately also, because they realize that sports is something that gives you so much visibility in the country, especially cricket.
Yeah.
So sports happened like that. Same with, like, fashion, because fashion also, and these are all, industries that sort of like opened up after liberalization, especially fashion. So they are also seeking corporate support. You need, like, that kind of money. Football needed that kind of money, because there was a lot of it was very cash strapped. AIFF was very cash strapped.
Fashion
So,
too, right?
Fashion too. Fashion is also, yeah. So fashion also, like, they were looking for it post liberalization. Corporates started sort of understanding that, this is a way for us to also, build our brand.
Yeah.
And same thing with, like, NMACC. You are leaving a cultural legacy. Like, no matter what happens with the Ambanis next, at a prime location in BKC, you are going to have a Neeta Mukesh Ambani Center.
Yeah, with your name. I
With
mean,
your
there's-
name on it. So I feel like that is what they get out of it, and they do. And again, like, I think a very constant pattern when it comes to Mukesh has been that he wants to, like, his philosophy, as other people told me, was that whatever he does, he wants to be, like, the biggest, like,
Hmm.
the I want to see Reliance everywhere. There's actually a, like, I think, quote in a previous Caravan piece also with respect to Geo, that, he wants to see not a world in which there's Geo, but like a Geo world, effectively, a world that is dipped in Geo. So I feel like that is the philosophy that also applies to what Reliance is doing in these areas. And also how Neeta is, right? Like, if you look at her like as like a billionaire wife, you see many people who are doing philanthropic endeavors. Like, it's not like she's not the only one,
Yeah.
but she's everywhere. Like, you can see her, and she wants it. That's the second part of it. The thing is that they are also doing it because she wants to, and she can. Like, that's what it seems like from my conversations with other people, that anytime anything would happen in the Olympics, someone would, like, win a medals. Like, sports journalists told me that their PR people harangue you that, like, put Neeta's
Yeah.
face with a congratulatory quote. So those are the kind of things you've heard about, like, I mean, Modi, and
Right. There
like,
was a
that's what
comparison to
there is
her
a
with-
comparison. So yeah, that's how, like, people sort of drew that for me.
Yeah.
So it's like all of these things sort of come together in this excessive portrayal of the like, this entire Bollywood celebrities coming in and all these things. And also because the industry is so dependent on them, right? These are people who own so many brands at this point of time. So actors need that for your advertisements also.
Yeah.
And also the film business in itself has changed so much over the last few years. You have, I mean, post-COVID especially, like, few movies are doing the kind of numbers that they used to do. You had star power earlier. Like, someone pointed out to me that, like, Akshay Kumar has given some 10, 13 flops. And earlier the funda used to be that you have like a big Bollywood star in a movie and it will do well. Now that's not the case anymore. So they also know that, box office numbers are actually not guaranteed to them anymore. So they are coming to be more reliant on OTT, which is essentially that, you have like a 25 lakh ka, like, budget that's been given. You've been given like a fixed amount that you're going to be paid for it. So you're not going to be making profit or loss.
Right.
Like, in the sense the OTT platform is going to. So you will get like there is going to be a stream of revenue that you get, like a fixed amount that you get. So producers and the industry sort of needs OTT at this point of time.
Yeah.
And who are the big players in OTT? Like, and now you're going to have Jio and Star merged together. So they are reliant on that.
Yeah.
Like, this is not to say they don't have like personal relations or something, but it is that is just how
Professional requirement as well.
that professional requirement also exists.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
this excessive, like, pushing Neeta Ambani as in the face of the public eye, how do you trace that? When did that begin? Is there a timeline to it?
I mean, the thing is that I think she has been doing some things like on and off. Like, I mean, she had aspirations to be working, from what I could tell from her previous interviews also. And she worked on the Jamnagar township at the turn of the millennium. But like an old family associate of theirs told me that, after she got married, she was fully bahued out. Like, she became this ideal bahu, but she was doing these things. And according to some employees, Mukesh would not take like a single call on design of anything without Neeta's input. They'd be like, "Bhabhi ko jaake dikhao," and like, this is these are colors, this, that. And then there was a Dhirubhai Ambani school. But essentially around the time of the split, she also gave some interviews which were like, I am Mukesh's sounding board, and these kind of things. And one anecdote that someone had told me, that Reliance Retail had started around I think 2004, 2005. At that point of time, she wanted to be involved in that. And according to this employee, it was that, she would sit with the top executives of those people and would want to discuss, flooring aisa hona chahiye, this should be that. And they were like, if we keep doing this, then when are we going to discuss the business end of things? So she was nudged towards the other side, like sports and creative things, where she was already showing interest. So that's sort of how it began. And then with Mumbai Indians is when you see her actually take center stage. Because in the first season, I don't think she was as involved. But after that, she became really, really invested in it. She would show up for all matches, bring her friends, and give many interviews, and also be like, a part of like the core decision making in the team.
Yeah. So IPL was her first foray.
IPL was her first foray, absolutely. And then from there you have ISL. Then IOC happened, and I mean, concurrently, you have like, the art and fashion side of things also kicking in.
Right. Something that was very interesting to me, which you also mentioned, is the micromanaging, such as
Yes,
in this
yes,
meeting.
yes.
About NMACC, there's a quote that says that she was very involved in deciding the temperature of the AC, the haircuts of the staff,
Yep.
which is unheard of even at a small organization.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, I mean, it's a big operation. For them, it's pocket change, right? But like for
Yeah.
them, everything in NMACC is Nita. Like, you have your Pichwai artwork, like a huge Pichwai artwork, because that's a favorite of the family. You have a Krishna Mandir, which is there on the ground floor. And, I entered it for the first time and I smelled some agarbatti and I was like, am I too internally biased? I don't know what's happening. And then I was like, oh, there is a mandir and there is an
Yeah.
agarbatti thing. So it's just like, I think they don't even make any bones about the fact that, like, this is our thing. But at the same time, the projection, they also wanted to be like, it's for the people. So it doesn't often seem to align, go
Right.
together with each other. But yeah, the micromanaging thing is something that, there were quite a few instances of that.
Wow.
But it's also like, I mean, you can see it in any way that you like, right? It's also like, it's her baby, it's her pet project. So she wants to be involved in each and every aspect of what gets done.
Yeah.
So in that regard, like, people were like, she was quite like
Hands-on.
hands-on and hardworking. So yeah.
Yeah. Something else that several Reliance employees told you was that there was a complex when it came to the Tata's
Yeah.
public perception,
Yes.
which was also very interesting.
Yes.
And how other industrialists are not so in the face
Yeah.
as the Ambanis
Right.
are or are trying to be. So if you could
Right.
tell us a little about these two.
I think with the Tatas, the thing is that, I mean, she also heads the Reliance Foundation, right? And that is also putting in a lot of CSR money, like in that foundation. So there's a lot that's happening over there. So there was an employee who told me that, oh, we do so much, then why does Mr. Tata get all the attention? And multiple people told me that they had that because I feel like somewhere Tatas, if you look at it, there are quite a few allegations against them also, right? Like,
Yeah.
of different kinds of things, but they've sort of enjoyed this larger image of being this, clean organization,
Goody
which
good,
is
yeah.
always, been in the right. And you saw a lot of that when Mr. Ratan Tata passed away as well. You saw that in the news, but no one would really cover the allegations against them. So it's that matter of image, I feel like, and I think the Ambanis, like, you have questions on Geo, how that's come together. There are questions on, whether he's close to Modi or not. And again, the split was such a big thing that happened. Your name coming up in Radia is such a big thing that happened. But like, Radia was also associated with the Tatas, which is like
Yeah.
forgotten, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that image, and especially again, like now that we've set up that they want to portray themselves a certain way. So if they feel like that's not being accomplished, if we are not being considered the best in philanthropy also, as we want to be the best in everything, then how can that happen? So I feel like from my conversations, that's where it seemed to come from.
Yeah. I think we've all of us have often wondered what are the aspirations of the top 0.01%.
Yeah.
And this piece, in a way, does answer that,
Right.
to just be the best at everything, to have
They
a public
do.
image,
Right.
the
right.
soft power.
Yeah, and they can afford it. And I think one quote that someone gave me, which was quite illuminating, is that, basically you put Mukesh's face on anything, it will become like, a pure business thing, right? You're putting Nita, who is like, and again, that is like your typical understanding of how things are also, that you're putting a woman over here, so it becomes more empathetic, it becomes more softer, it becomes not about the money in sports, but about, the emotion in sport. And that's how these people seem to think as well, because another like former employee told me that, they'd heard like a business head say that, if a man is watching a sport, sitting and watching a sport at TV, then he's just sitting at home and watching a sport. But if a woman is doing it, then whole family is sitting and watching. So it seems like that they are aware of this.
Yeah.
They are aware of the fact that, this can help them establish a certain soft power. And it is true that, Gautam Adani is his biggest competitor and he doesn't come close to any of this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And a fashion journalist, a senior fashion journalist told you that they act like they have new money. Do
Yeah.
you agree with that quote, or does it seem too far-fetched to you?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, that quote is there just to sort of give people a sense of how others in the industry
View them. Yeah.
You know, it actually has nothing to do with how I view them or how I see them, because yeah, like that is how people may read them, but they will also go to the NMACC, right? Like, and so that's how it is there. And also, I think the quote was more to say that, you know, the luxury industry around the world is suffering. You know, it's not doing as well financially, but
Hmm.
these people are now putting in money into luxury just because they can.
Yeah.
So I think it's that dichotomy. Like you want to capture, like, be into that space so much that, like, it doesn't really matter to you if it's not making money right now, or you may have some bigger plan of, like, okay, it's going to do something after 10-15 years.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I think
And
that's the main
what do
point
you
of that.
think is in the pipeline for Neeta Ambani, particularly in the next few years? What are the different forays that you see her getting into?
I mean, I think a couple of things that I'm very interested in seeing how they pan out. I asked someone this also, that do you think she wants to chair the IOC? And they were like, I mean, she would certainly
Yeah.
want that if from whatever we understand of Reliance, but that's like a different game. That's like a global political game. But again, they want to establish themselves as like a like, you know, a global family, like they as, like, you know, a family that the world knows about. So that I want to see how that pans out, in terms of, like, whether they bring, if India, like, Olympics does come to India, that's going to be a big thing.
Hmm.
And that is, like, credit is going to go to her for it because of the IOC session that happened. And again, like, people told me that, like, you know, you can say whatever you want, like, you know, IOA, like, the people were focusing more on Neeta Ambani than PT Usha, who heads the Indian Olympic Association at
Yeah.
that point of time. But they did it, right? And they got all these stalwarts of that industry, of that space, and to come there. So that credit is going to go to her. So I want to see how that pans out. And I think the GeoStar merger, I want to see what they end up doing in that space, and how
Hmm.
that is going to be, like, how that's going to impact the OTT film space.
Yeah.
Because again, like, I mean, with Geo Cinema also, we mentioned this, like, it is, you can say, I mean, they put out this documentary on, like, the third day of the pre-wedding festival at Jamnagar. And that is the pre-wedding, those festivities they had, you know, Diljit Dosanjh perform, they had Rihanna perform, but they only focused on the third day, which was like the more, you know, there's a some hastakshar ceremony that happened, and it was just like all pious stuff. You were showing
Hmm.
classical dances, this, that. And the only person who speaks to the camera in that, I think it's some 40-45 minutes long, is Neeta. And they're just showing visuals of classical dance and things like that. And, you know, Deepika Padukone, Shah Rukh Khan, they are sitting there, and it seems like they've picked those shots from the B-rolls. Like, they are not the main thing at all over there. And then you have a speech by Mukesh where he's focusing on how much he loves Neeta and what she means to him and this and that. And then you have a 6-minute dance performance by Neeta in a 40-minute documentary, right? So again, like, you know, you could have made so much money and gotten so much traction if you just shown, like, Diljit or, like, you know, Rihanna or all these other stars, more of them. But they were like, you know, we need to show Neeta
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah.
I want to see if you have instances like that also in GeoStar, and also in terms of artistic freedom, what that
Hmm.
leads to. So these are two
Definitely.
things that I'm very, very curious to see
Yeah.
what happens in these
Definitely.
areas.
And something else I'm also getting after this conversation with you and the story
Mhm.
is just the Ambanis really understanding, you know, the how Indians need to see that glamour. It's
Yeah.
not enough knowing that, okay, someone is super rich. When you
Yeah.
see it being thrown in your faces,
Yeah.
when you see it with Bollywood stars,
Right.
Hollywood stars, the
Yeah.
way they have been bowing down to them,
Right, right.
that really makes you,
Yeah, it's
we
like
need
a
to see.
flex. Yeah.
It's a flex, if anything, yeah.
So yeah.
And do you see that sort of, is there any sort of mentorship for Isha Ambani to lead these aspects later on, or is there something else on the
So she
cards
is
for her?
involved a little bit in the NMACC. She runs the art house over there. And she is the person who's interested in, like, in fashion, in
Yeah.
art. So that sort of grooming is sort of like not grooming, but again, like, I mean, something that she is interested in. And she also heads like she's going to be in charge of the Reliance retail end of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she's certainly going to be there. And again, she also is like someone who's really, really into fashion. But again, like, there's a lehenga that Valentino, like a very big designer, made for her
The blue
wedding.
one.
Yeah, this is a different one.
Okay.
For a wedding, which was also exhibited in a NMECC show on like India in fashion or something like that. So again, like, I mean, they have these, like, they have the resources to put themselves on the top, right?
Yeah.
To establish, like, she has the resources and the means to establish herself as like this, fashion icon of
Yeah.
sorts. So
What would you do if you had this much money and resources, guys? I mean, very non-journalistic question, but I'm just curious as to, I mean, what does one even do with all the money after charity?
I don't know. I think if we can make more independent media organizations here.
That's a good
to
pitch.
cover, yeah, pay News Laundry, pay Caravan, guys, please.
And you don't even have to be in the top 0.1% to
You
be able to do
don't.
that. You just have to subscribe to News Laundry and Caravan.
Yes.
So we can bring you stories such as
Exactly.
these. I
Yeah.
think that's a great way to end this podcast. I'd like to come to the end of this, the last section, which is the recommendation section. Amrita, if you can recommend something for our viewers, a book, a show, an article, just about anything that you think they should watch or read or consume.
I saw Joyland recently. It's this Pakistani movie which is on Mubi.
Yeah.
And I think there are like some descriptions of it online about like how it's related to a trans person. But I mean, I just feel like, I mean, everything I've read about it online doesn't do it justice, because it's such a beautifully made movie. So yeah, guys, please watch it.
Definitely. Akanksha, what about you?
This 2005 movie Seher, which I kind of watched to answer a part of your question related to process of going about the story. So it's focused on how UPSTF was established in the 90s, late 90s in UP, considering the kind of crimes that the state was witnessing then. And it also then delves into some transgressions that this investigation agency kind of gets involved into in order to nab a gangster. So I think it's a very old movie starring Arshad Varsi. It's slightly slow paced, but it kind of lays down the background of setting up something like UPSTF.
Yeah.
It's a 2-hour movie, so that would be one. And once you're done with the 2-hour movie, spend another hour and read my story.
That's
It's
a good pitch too.
6,500 words long.
Where is the movie available?
It's available on YouTube.
Okay.
You can watch it
Yeah.
for free.
Definitely will do that.
Yeah.
I'd like to recommend an interview on News Laundry. It's Abhinandan's interview of Shaila Rashid. It's been there's been a lot of chatter about it on social media, but I did watch the entire interview and I'd recommend you to. It's a very interesting to see just how Shaila Rashid has changed. Abhinandan has a very unique style of interviewing that comes across in this interview. So do watch it and tell us what you think about it.
It's fine if your view is that Muslims bear the burden of being anti-establishment, because I don't know why. You can explain it better.
That's not what I said.
For me, for some people, they believe that the only good Muslim is either a dead Muslim or a jailed Muslim.
You put words in my mouth there. I did not say that it is the burden of the Muslim to oppose.
You wouldn't have
Again,
asked
you're
me
not-
this question if the book was about Hindus.
Okay, you'll have to let me complete my sentences like I let you complete yours. Because like I said, this is the News Laundry studio and that is how we converse here. This is not Republic, this is not Times, this is not Aaj Tak. Now that you've asked everybody, what is your prognosis? What will make us Viksit Bharat?
My own, now if you're asking my position and not other people's
No, based
position,
on what
am I
you've
allowed
spoken.
to answer, as myself?
Yeah, but you said you asked everybody. We
Because I
form-
tried to answer and you scoffed and you were like, Shaila, please don't. Oh, yeah. So if you're just going to scoff at it, then I won't be able to answer.
Well, I didn't scoff at it, but
I mean, you
no
did,
promises.
yeah.
But it depends on your answer. If the answer, according to me, doesn't make mathematics, I will challenge it. Of course, I will. That's normal,
But you have
right?
to allow me to answer.
Of
then.
course, go ahead. I'm
As
not
I'm
stopping
allowing
you.
you to ask
I haven't
any
stopped
questions
you.
that you want.
I haven't stopped you.
I mean, you did when you were just in the middle of it. Oh, Shaila, like, I don't like this. It's not my problem if you don't like it, buddy. When do you think this Hindu-Muslim problem started in India?
It's been there
Since
way
when?
beyond. I'd say ever since the two communities have existed.
So let's not
If you would-
pretend that it has, come in or it has started only after a certain government has come, or only after, like you showed me this ad, which I watched very patiently. But I want to ask you a question, Abhinandan. Was India divided on religious lines?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was divided on Islamic lines.
Which is a
Because
religion.
And with that, this podcast is adjourned.
Journalism at News Laundry is powered by the public, because when the public pays, the public is served. Visit newslaundry.com/subscription and pick a payment plan of your choice. Pay to keep news free and independent. Your future, and indeed the future of democracy, depends on it.